No one asked her name, but the second she stepped past the threshold of the aircraft, silence adjusted itself to her presence. The scent of recirculated air, citrus cleanser, and something sterile like plastic gloves curled faintly in the cabin, but it was the weight of 30-some eyes, not the air pressure, that bore down on her. Rain speckled the windows. Outside, engines whined beneath the gray morning. Inside, a woman in an unassuming slate uniform stood in first class, calm, centered, and out of place. Her skin was deep like soil after rain. Her hair, short and tightly coiled, was pressed close to her scalp in sharp lines. She wore no jewelry, no makeup, no smile. Just quiet, fitted authority. The flight attendant, young, white, her lipstick pristine, appeared beside her like a reflex. "Hi there. I think economy starts just down that way," she said, with a practiced kindness that mistook suggestion for command. Amira Laurent said nothing. She held out her boarding pass without speaking. The flight attendant hesitated, reading the slip, then rereading it. Her posture shifted. My apologies, Ms. Laurent. Please go ahead." Amira nodded once and stepped into row 1. She placed her bag beneath seat 1D. She sat. Her knees didn't touch the seat in front of her, but her presence somehow filled all the space around it. A man in a tailored jacket across the aisle glanced at her, then turned to his phone. A woman in pearl earrings leaned toward her teenage daughter and whispered something into a palm. Luggage clicked into place in overhead bins, and the scent of status filled the cabin. Leather carry-ons, dry-cleaned wool, and $6 coffee. No one asked where she came from, but the absence of small talk was louder than words. She adjusted her seatbelt. Her hands were still, her eyes fixed forward. She did not fidget, did not scroll, did not signal that she needed to be acknowledged, and that, more than anything, unnerved them. The murmurs began behind her, quiet, clipped, and rehearsed. Security detail? Maybe a pilot? Contractor? The plane kept boarding. Businessmen with sleep-starved faces, a couple in matching vests, a man with a worn duffel bag and a limp that said he'd served somewhere too hot for comfort. Each one slowed near her seat. Each one looked. None of them spoke. The last to board was a woman in designer heels, blonde, mid-40s, her expression fixed in the bored confidence of someone used to upgrades and early boarding. She paused at row 1 and blinked. "Excuse me," she said, voice bright and brittle. "I think you're in my seat." Amira looked up. Her eyes were dark, steady, and gave away nothing. She didn't sigh. She didn't scowl. She simply handed over her boarding pass for the second time that morning. The woman scanned it. Her brows tightened. "There must be a mistake. I specifically requested 1D. It's in my profile." Amira did not reply. The boarding pass remained between them. The woman's eyes flicked toward the attendant, who had reappeared with a too-wide smile. "Mrs. Bellamy," she greeted, with familiar deference. "Is there a problem?" "I always sit here," Bellamy said, her voice honeyed but firm. "I'm sure there's just a mix-up. Would you mind helping her find her correct seat?" The attendant took the pass and went pale. "Ms. Laurent is in the right seat," she said carefully. Bellamy's expression didn't change. "Well, then perhaps Pinnacle can move me somewhere suitable. I'm platinum. Surely there's another window seat available." The attendant hesitated. "Let me check." Bellamy turned back toward Amira, eyes narrowing slightly. "Nothing personal," she said with a tight smile. "But I've got a long flight ahead, and I don't do middle seats." Amira looked at her without blinking. Behind them, passengers began shifting, glancing up. A businessman folded his paper. A woman with a laptop paused mid-keystroke. Bellamy's voice wasn't raised, but the tone, polite, clipped, and just sharp enough, had begun to pierce the quiet. "I assume you fly often?" Bellamy asked. "You know how these things go. Sometimes there's a glitch in the system." Happens all the time. Amira didn't answer. A child's voice broke the tension. Mom, is she a soldier? The mother hissed a hush, but it was too late. Several heads turned. Bellamy's smile returned, forced now, brittle at the edges. You military? No reply. Interesting. She paused, tilting her head. Do you always travel in uniform? Amira's hands, still folded neatly in her lap, remained motionless. The flight attendant returned. Mrs. Bellamy, I've found another seat in row 3 aisle, extra leg room. Bellamy's mouth pinched. Not a window. No, ma'am. She stood, weighing her pride against inconvenience. Her voice dropped half a pitch. Look, I'm sure she's perfectly nice, she said to no one and everyone. But people like me rely on consistency. I earned that seat, and I don't appreciate being displaced. The word echoed. Displaced. Amira finally turned her head. Her eyes locked with Bellamy's. There was no anger in them, no apology, only gravity, the kind that made people shift in their chairs without knowing why. Bellamy faltered. For a second, her composure slipped. The attendant cleared her throat. Mrs. Bellamy, the captain would like to depart on time. We need to close the cabin. And that was the pivot. Bellamy inhaled, sharp and shallow. She took a half step back, then turned and walked away, her heels clipping down the aisle. The attendant mouthed something, thank you or sorry, maybe both, and vanished. The hush held a moment longer. Then someone muttered, about time. And somewhere behind row 6, a man began to clap. Just once. But it was enough. The plane cut through the clouds with a smoothness that belied the tension still clinging to the front of the cabin. No one spoke to her, but no one looked away either. Eyes flicked toward her like moths to a flame, compelled, uncertain, a little afraid of being seen looking. Amira sat motionless, but she was not still. Inside, her mind moved like clockwork, slow, precise, patient. She was used to quiet scrutiny, the kind that came with walking into briefing rooms outranked by everyone in the room, on paper. The kind that started as doubt, shifted to confusion, and settled into silence once she delivered. But this was different. The stakes here weren't tactical. They were personal, intimate. The kind of judgment people made without knowing they were judging. Across the aisle, the man in the blazer finally spoke. You handled that better than I would have. His voice was low, quiet enough to preserve plausible deniability if she didn't respond. She looked at him without turning her head. He glanced over, then down at his tablet. I'm not trying to bother you. Just saw what happened. He waited. When she said nothing, he added, Name's Marcus Tillman, consultant, mostly logistics. She nodded once. A beat passed. You served? He asked. Yes. Army? Marines. He gave a short, impressed exhale. Damn. You still active? No. He studied her more closely now. Not with the suspicion from earlier, but with something quieter. Respect, maybe. Or curiosity dressed as it. Amira turned her gaze back toward the window. The clouds below were soft and endless, like a world erasing itself. You know, he said after a pause, a few years ago, my brother tried to move his family to Dallas, bought first-class tickets, plane was half empty and they still made him show his boarding pass twice, only black family in the cabin, said it was policy. She did not respond, but her jaw tensed slightly. Marcus leaned back, sighed. Not policy. It's performance. Gatekeepers doing what they think keeps everything in order. He left her alone after that. A flight attendant came by offering drinks. Amira declined. The man across from her asked for bourbon. The woman behind her asked for sparkling water, her voice brittle. She did not look forward when her drink was served. Near the galley, a toddler cried once and was hushed quickly. The plane vibrated softly as it climbed higher into the stratosphere, where sunlight spilled through the windows in long gold beams. Amira closed her eyes. Her hands rested on her lap, fingers barely touching. Her mind drifted to a stretch of desert so wide it swallowed noise, to a convoy stalled on the edge of a mining town that never made the maps, to the heat of metal against her forearm and the sharp, unforgiving silence after an explosion. She had buried noise like that once, but sometimes it clawed its way back. She did not sleep, but she drifted, into breath, into stillness, into memory. A voice woke her, not loud, not unkind. "Ms. Laurent?" She opened her eyes. The attendant, different from before, stood beside her. Older, black. Her name tag read Joyce. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Joyce said gently. "There's a passenger in row 5 who asked if she could switch seats with you." Amira tilted her head. "She saw what happened," Joyce continued. "Said you shouldn't have to sit in a place where you were disrespected. She wants to offer you her seat. 1A. Amira studied her for a moment. "Why?" she asked. Joyce's smile was small. "Some of us were raised to believe dignity isn't just something you carry. It's something others ought to recognize." Amira paused, then nodded. Joyce stepped aside, and a young woman appeared. Mid-20s, Afro-Latina, camera clipped to her hoodie, student ID still around her neck. "I didn't want to be forward," she said. "I'm Nadia. I'm a journalism student at USC. I saw what that woman did earlier. I live-streamed it. People are talking." Amira's eyes narrowed slightly. "Talking?" Nadia held up her phone. 50,000 views since takeoff. Comments are flooding in. Folks are pissed. "I didn't ask to be filmed." "I know. I didn't show your face. Just hers. Just enough to show what happened." The cabin had grown quieter again. Nadia shifted her weight, unsure. "Look, I know this isn't the kind of spotlight anyone asks for, but some people needed to see it, to believe it." Amira exhaled through her nose, not annoyed, just tired, of being used as proof, of being turned into a statement without consent. Still, there was something earnest in the girl's voice, something raw and unpolished. "I appreciate the offer," Amira said, "but I'll stay here." Nadia hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, but if you ever do want to talk, or if you'd prefer the video come down, just say the word." She handed Amira a card. It was creased, handwritten, a real human thing in a world of polished plastic. After she left, Joyce lingered a moment. "You remind me of my sister," she said. "She made E7 before they even learned how to say her name right. Never asked for respect. Just did the work." Amira's lips parted slightly, almost a smile. Joyce placed a cup of coffee on her tray. "Compliments of the flight deck." "For what?" "For not giving them the ending they were expecting." Then she disappeared down the aisle. Amira picked up the cup. It was warm in her hands. She sipped it slowly, and for the first time since boarding, the space around her no longer felt borrowed. It felt held. The hum of the cabin had settled into something close to calm, but it was a stillness built on fragile balance. Not peace, just tension packed down enough to pass as silence. Amira finished her coffee. She set the cup back on the tray, careful not to clatter. Across from her, Marcus had removed his tie and loosened the top button of his shirt, his tablet now asleep in his lap. "You know what I keep thinking about?" he said, not looking at her. "That woman, what's her name? Mrs. Bellamy? She really believed she was entitled to your seat. Not because of a mistake, because it made sense to her. In her mind, you didn't fit." Amira looked forward. She did not correct him. He wasn't wrong. Marcus leaned in slightly. "I used to work in contract negotiation. Defense. I've seen guys walk into rooms thinking their resume would speak for itself, only to find out the room had already decided who they were, before a word was said. He paused, then added, "You didn't give her what she wanted. That bothers people more than anything. Quiet dignity makes loud people feel small." Amira didn't answer. She didn't need to. He understood that too. Overhead, the captain's voice came through, casual and clipped. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Rayner. We're about an hour from touchdown in Los Angeles. Weather on the ground is sunny, 68 degrees. We'll begin descent shortly." The chime followed. A few people stirred. Someone yawned. A curtain rustled near the galley. Life resumed in slow, measured increments, but the balance was already shifting again. From row 3, a man in a crisp navy suit stood up and approached. He moved with purpose, the kind of purpose that assumed attention would follow him. His hair was gelled into a careful wave, and a monogrammed briefcase hung from his shoulder. His smile was fixed, but his eyes were too alert. He stopped at Amira's row and nodded to her. "Excuse me, ma'am. My name's Brennan Carr. I'm VP of Operations for Pinnacle. Heard there was a seating situation earlier." Marcus sat up straighter. Carr continued, glancing between them. "I just want to apologize on behalf of the airline. Mrs. Bellamy has flown with us for over a decade, and while we value her loyalty, we do not condone any behavior that makes our other guests uncomfortable." He smiled wider. Amira didn't respond. Carr's voice lowered slightly. "She's, a known personality in our ecosystem. She owns real estate along our major corridors, has donated to our annual equity fund. We try to keep all our top-tier customers satisfied." He shifted his weight. "I also understand there may be some social media interest in this incident." Amira finally looked at him. Not harshly, not aggressively. Just long enough for him to understand she had already mapped him before he opened his mouth. "Is that your concern?" she asked quietly. "Optics?" Carr cleared his throat. No, of course not. We care about every passenger. It's just, sometimes things escalate, and I'd like to make sure you feel taken care of." Marcus chuckled without smiling. "You hear that, Amira? They'd like to take care of you, like a situation." Carr's eyes flicked toward Marcus, then back to her. "I'd be happy to offer you a credit," he said, "or even a voucher for future travel, just as a gesture." Amira held his gaze. "A gesture," she repeated. He nodded eagerly. "Exactly." "No," she said. Carr blinked. Sorry? I'm not interested in a gesture." A flush of red crept up his neck. "Well, if you change your mind, I won't." Her voice was even, flat, but not cruel. Carr lingered a second too long, then offered a tight nod and turned back toward the front of the cabin. Marcus exhaled. God, he was sweating through that suit. You'd think you pulled a knife on him. Amira's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes tightened, then softened. "He wasn't here to apologize," she said. "He was here to preempt blame." Marcus leaned back. "That's corporate America for you." He said it like a joke, but no one laughed. From behind, a voice called out, soft, a little nervous. "Ms. Laurent?" It was Nadia, the journalism student. She held her phone with both hands now, as if it were heavy. "I know you said you didn't want the video, but—" She hesitated. Amira turned slightly in her seat. "It's already been picked up by an outlet. A civil rights org reposted it." "It's spreading." "How far?" Marcus asked. "National, maybe farther. A couple million views." Amira exhaled slowly. "They're calling it first class, second guess," Nadia said. "You're trending." Marcus shook his head. "Hell of a tagline." "I can take it down," Nadia added. Just say the word. Amira was quiet. Then she said, "Don't." Nadia blinked. Amira turned fully now. "Let them see. Let them decide what they believe. But don't use my name. Don't tell them who I am." Nadia nodded. "Of course." As she turned to walk away, Amira called out, softly, "You said you're a student." "Yeah." "What are you learning?" Nadia's answer came without pause. "How to make them listen." The seatbelt sign pinged on. The plane began its descent. Marcus looked over, eyebrows raised. "You sure about that? Letting it spread?" Amira stared out the window. "I didn't start it," she said. "But if they're watching, really watching, then they'll see more than me." The clouds broke beneath them. Through the glass, Los Angeles emerged in full. Grid lines of freeway, rooftops like circuit boards, light shimmering on the edge of the ocean. A city built on performance, projection, perception. And yet, in this small, pressurized space, something real had surfaced. As the wheels lowered, Amira sat straighter, not preparing for impact, but for arrival. The wheels struck tarmac with a muted thud, and the plane rumbled forward in a slow deceleration, the city of Los Angeles unfolding beyond the window like a mirage of glass and ambition. No one clapped, no one cheered. But there was a shift, barely audible, like everyone was waiting for something that hadn't happened yet. The seatbelt sign blinked off. The usual rustle followed, seatbacks returning upright, phones pulled from pockets, bags nudged with shoes. But no one in first class moved. Not right away. Not while Amira was still seated. She remained still, one hand resting on her knee, the other closed loosely around the edge of the armrest. Her eyes were calm, but her body held the memory of the moment. How silence had shaped around her, how doubt had become air, how she had sat inside all of it without breaking. Joyce, the older flight attendant, came by quietly. "The jet bridge is ready. You'll be among the first to disembark." Amira nodded, stood slowly. Marcus rose too, adjusting his blazer with the absent-minded grace of a man used to boardrooms but unused to feeling like a bystander. Behind them, passengers shifted like a tide waiting for current. The quiet stretched again. As Amira moved toward the exit, Nadia appeared near the galley, her phone now stashed, her hands empty. She didn't speak, only nodded once, like a small salute. The flight deck door opened and the captain stepped out. Younger than expected, white, clean-shaven, with a smile that tried too hard to be neutral. "Ms. Laurent," he began, but she walked past him without breaking stride. She stepped into the jet bridge, where filtered airport air replaced the cabin's recycled breath. Outside, ground crew swarmed like ants under fluorescent light. Inside the terminal, glass walls shimmered under the sun. The crowd had already begun to gather. Phones were up, eyes locked in. Nadia's video had done its work. Amira walked with measured pace down the corridor. No security escorted her. No announcement was made. But the world had caught up with her without invitation. At the gate, a woman in a charcoal suit stood waiting, earpiece clipped to her collar. She had the posture of someone who took orders from men in corner offices and never liked repeating herself. "Ms. Laurent, I'm Camille Dean, Director of Client Relations at Pinnacle Airways. I'd like a moment, if you'll allow it." Amira stopped. Camille gestured toward a glass-walled lounge nearby. "Somewhere private. Quiet." Amira followed. Inside the room, everything was tastefully sterile. Muted gray couches, complimentary sparkling water, no clocks. A single large screen in the corner displayed a news channel muted but subtitled. Her face was not on it. But the headline was, "First Class Incident Sparks National Discussion on Bias in Air Travel." Camille waited until they were seated before speaking again. I know you declined compensation when our regional VP approached you. I want to be clear. We're not here to offer you money. We're here to listen. If you'd be willing to speak. Amira studied her. What do you want me to say? Camille folded her hands. Whatever you feel needs to be said. Or nothing. It's your call. A pause. Then she added more quietly, but a lot of people are watching, and we'd rather respond with substance than scramble after damage control. Amira leaned back, eyes scanning the room like she was checking for structural weaknesses. She found none, just discomfort hiding under polished professionalism. I've been watching too, she said, long before today. Camille tilted her head slightly. I've watched how quickly people look for ways to soften what happened. Call it a misunderstanding, a miscommunication. I've heard that voice before. Same rhythm, same tone. It always ends with a smile and an offer to make things right in a way that costs nothing. Camille didn't deny it. I didn't speak on the plane, Amira said, because the people who needed to understand already knew, and the ones who didn't, no amount of explaining would make it real to them. Camille's voice lowered. But they're listening now. Amira nodded slowly. That's the part that worries me. A silence passed between them. Then Camille stood. Would you consider speaking with our leadership? We're planning an internal review. Training protocol, escalation procedures, customer response tiers, real changes. Would I be a participant or a mascot? Amira asked. Camille winced but didn't flinch. A consultant. Paid. Independent. Amira considered that. I'll think about it, she said. Camille held out a card. Not a corporate rectangle, but handwritten, just like Nadia's. Amira accepted it. No promises. Just presence. Outside the lounge, the terminal buzzed like a live wire. People watched her pass with open curiosity now. Some whispered, others stared longer than they meant to. The line between recognition and voyeurism had already blurred. She moved through it like wind through tall grass, shaping nothing, disturbing everything. Marcus waited near the baggage carousel. When he saw her, he raised a hand. You good? He asked. I'm here, she said. That's not what I asked. She almost smiled. They stood in companionable silence as bags spun past. Marcus retrieved his with practiced ease. Amira's arrived next. A single duffel, worn at the edges, the handle patched with dark stitching. I've got a car, he offered. Heading toward Venice. She shook her head. Someone's picking me up. As if on cue, a beat-up pickup pulled into view outside the glass. The driver stayed inside. The engine idled. Marcus nodded toward the door. You're a storm front, you know that? Amira glanced at him. Not a spectacle, he said. A shift. Then he walked away. She stepped outside. The dry California sun met her like an old friend, indifferent and absolute. She climbed into the truck without a word. The driver didn't ask about the flight, and Amira didn't offer a single detail. But as they pulled into traffic, her phone buzzed. A message from a number she didn't recognize. We saw what happened. We believe you. We've seen it too. She let the message sit on the screen for a moment. Then she locked the phone, closed her eyes, and leaned her head against the window. Not because she was tired, but because for the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone. Traffic crawled across Sepulveda like it had something to prove. The late afternoon sun hung low over Los Angeles, turning the windshields ahead into sheets of light. Amira sat in the passenger seat, one hand resting on the cracked armrest, the other in her lap. The truck's interior smelled faintly of oil, leather, and coffee that had been poured too long ago to drink. The driver, a tall man with graying locks and a voice like gravel softened by time, glanced at her only once. You hungry? Amira shook her head. You will be. We'll stop. He didn't say more, and she didn't ask. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was familiar. The kind of quiet forged between people who had once sat together on dusty steps in places no one could pronounce, waiting for things they never wanted to see. His name was Isaiah Cole. He wasn't blood, but he was closer than most people who shared hers. They pulled into a corner diner near Culver City. No name, just a flickering open sign, and the smell of onions and burnt coffee floating out the door. Inside, the booths were cracked vinyl, the air buzzing faintly with the sound of an old ceiling fan. They sat in the back. The waitress, older Latina, gold cross on her neck, greeted Isaiah by name and didn't ask Amira anything except, "Sweet tea or strong?" "Strong," Amira said. The coffee arrived black and burnt. It tasted like memory. Isaiah stirred his with 2 sugars. "Your face isn't on the news, but the story is." Amira didn't look up. "That's how I wanted it." He nodded. "Still, doesn't mean they won't find it." She said nothing. He continued. "I got a call this morning. Someone from Atlanta, a civil liberties group, said they're putting together a panel, air travel and implicit bias. They want a veteran's voice." Amira raised an eyebrow. Isaiah chuckled. "No, not me. You." She stared into her cup. The coffee was already cold. "I didn't ask for any of this." "I know. I didn't make a speech. I didn't stage a protest." "No," he said. "You just didn't move." The silence between them stretched again, this one heavier. Not resistance, reflection. Isaiah set his cup down. "You remember Fort Clayton? That briefing before Honduras?" Amira nodded slowly. "You were the only one who corrected the colonel's math on troop rotation. You didn't raise your voice, just handed him the report. And he ignored it. Until he couldn't. That convoy would have walked into an ambush if you hadn't run the numbers right." She looked out the window. The sky was starting to turn that deep LA blue that looked artificial until you breathed it in. Isaiah leaned forward. "It's not about noise. It's about precision, about presence. That's what gets under their skin. They can't place you, can't categorize you." The waitress brought a plate of eggs and toast. Amira didn't remember ordering, but the smell grounded her. She ate slowly. Isaiah sipped his coffee and watched her the way old mentors do, quietly, like checking for fractures. "You still writing?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not since Kuwait." "You should." She didn't respond. Outside, a group of teenagers passed the diner window, laughing too loudly, faces lit by their phones. One of them pointed toward a screen and said the words, "First class," like it was already a meme. Amira turned back to her food. Isaiah caught the gesture. "You're part of the story now, whether you want to be or not." "I don't want to be anyone's symbol." He nodded. "Then don't be. Be the reason they stop asking for one." They finished in silence. She paid the bill before he could argue. When they stepped back into the street, the air had shifted. The heat had broken. The wind was moving again. They stood beside the truck for a long moment before he spoke. "There's someone you should meet." "I'm not interested in press." "Not press." "Then who?" "She's 13. Her name's Mara. Her mom showed her that video. Now she wants to join Civil Air Patrol. Said she didn't know girls who looked like her could fly." Amira blinked. "She thinks I'm a pilot?" Isaiah shrugged. "Does it matter?" They drove in silence, the city stretching out around them. At a red light near Fairfax, Amira's phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. "I showed my students your story today. We had a conversation we never had space for before. Thank you." She put the phone down. When they reached Isaiah's apartment, he parked and handed her a key. "Stay here tonight. he said. You'll be safer. I'm not hiding. I didn't say hide. I said rest. She took the key. Inside, the apartment smelled like cedar and old books. The walls were lined with photos, units, medals, faces of people who probably didn't come home. She stood in the hallway for a while, looking at a photo of herself in uniform, much younger, standing beside Isaiah under a foreign sun. The woman in the photo looked like she had a plan for everything. Amira walked to the guest room and closed the door behind her. The bed was too soft. The light from the street outside painted the walls in slanted gold. She didn't sleep right away. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands in her lap. Eventually, she opened her notebook for the first time in almost a year. The pen felt unfamiliar, but the words came. One line at first, then two, then the shape of something she hadn't allowed herself to write in a long time. She wasn't writing about what had happened. She was writing about what might come next. The next morning arrived not with sunlight, but with stillness. A stillness that settled over Isaiah's apartment like dust. Amira sat by the window with the blinds tilted halfway, letting narrow blades of daylight cut across her forearm. Her notebook was open again. 3 lines from the night before remained the only thing on the page. She hadn't written more. She didn't know if she wanted to. Outside, the city exhaled. Cars murmured down the street, dogs barked in bursts, someone watered plants on a nearby balcony. But nothing intruded. Not yet. Isaiah was already gone when she emerged from the guest room. A note sat on the kitchen counter beneath a mug. In his handwriting, "Coffee's strong, like it should be, back by noon. If you need the car, take it. Keys by the door." She drank the coffee standing up. The bitterness reminded her of early mornings in Kandahar, before heat rose off the tarmac and turned metal into something dangerous. Before orders, before casualties, before silence became a skill. She didn't take the truck. She walked. The city pressed around her, vibrant and indifferent. Billboards blinked promises she didn't believe. Cafes overflowed with people explaining projects into their phones. Joggers passed her in neon vests, earbuds in, expressions blank. She kept walking until the blocks changed character. Palm trees gave way to brick storefronts, then to concrete. The sidewalks grew wider, less polished. Fewer dogs, more people sitting without destination. She stopped at a barber shop with faded signage and a worn bench outside. Inside, the sound of clippers and old soul music mingled in the air. A boy no older than 10 sat in the chair, cape tight around his neck, watching the mirror like it might change its mind. Amira stood just outside. She wasn't there for a haircut, just for the feeling. A few minutes passed before a woman in a navy tracksuit emerged from the convenience store next door. She glanced at Amira, then did a double take. "Wait, I saw you. Online." Amira tensed slightly. "You were on that flight, the one with the woman in the seat." She didn't reply. The woman stepped closer. "You handled that with grace. Real grace. My daughter. She saw that video and asked why no one helped. I didn't know what to say." Amira met her gaze. "You just did." The woman smiled, soft and tired. "They don't teach this in school." "They never did." Amira nodded once and kept walking. By midday, the air had thickened with sun. She returned to Isaiah's just as he pulled into the driveway, brown bag in hand. "Sandwiches," he said, "and a call." Amira raised an eyebrow. "Her name's Daria, works at Horizon Youth Center. She saw the video and figured out who you were, wants you to come talk." "I'm not qualified." Isaiah snorted. "You think they care about qualifications? They've got kids asking questions no adult has ever answered directly. Maybe you don't want to be the answer. That doesn't mean you're not the one they need." She said nothing, but she didn't throw the paper bag away either. That afternoon, she sat on the edge of Isaiah's sofa, sandwich half-eaten, and opened her notebook again. This time, she flipped past the earlier lines. She started fresh. She wrote, "Strength is not loud. It's not in the way you stand or speak. It's in how you stay seated when everything around you tells you to move." She underlined the last 4 words. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown sender again. I was on that flight, 2 rows behind. I didn't say anything. I should have. I'm sorry. She stared at it, then typed back. Then say something now. Not to me, to someone else who needs to hear it. Later that evening, she stood outside Horizon Youth Center, a squat brick building with faded paint and a courtyard filled with cracked benches. A hand-painted mural stretched across the side wall, portraits of black astronauts, Latina engineers, indigenous scientists. Names she recognized. Names she didn't. Names erased in textbooks but still here, held in paint and permanence. Daria met her at the gate. Young, sharp-eyed, and fast-talking, she reminded Amira of someone she used to be. They're in the community room. Ages range from 12 to 17. They've all seen the clip. I'm not here to explain it. You don't have to. Just be real. That's all they're looking for. The room was warm and crowded. Posters on the wall showed local leaders, STEM programs, Know Your Rights pamphlets. Folding chairs filled with young bodies turned toward her as she entered. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then a girl in a denim jacket raised her hand. Was it scary? Amira didn't ask what it meant. She knew. No, she said. It was exhausting. A boy across the room leaned forward. Why didn't you yell at her? Because that's what she expected. Silence. Then the girl again. Would you do it different if the cameras weren't there? Amira met her gaze. No. Another hand. Have you always been like that? Calm? No, she said. But I've always been watching. They asked more questions after that. Some hard, some unsure, some that didn't have answers. Amira didn't perform. She didn't teach. She just stood there and answered as best she could. And for that room, that was enough. When she stepped outside, dusk had settled. Streetlights blinked awake. The mural on the wall caught the last of the fading sunlight. Isaiah was waiting by the truck, leaning against the hood, arms crossed. How'd it go? Amira looked up at the sky, then at her own hands. They didn't need me to be a hero. Isaiah raised an eyebrow. They just needed proof, she said, that you don't have to shout to be heard. 3 days had passed since Horizon. No press, no podium, just a room full of questions and silence that waited its turn. Amira had returned to her apartment in Echo Park, where everything was exactly as she'd left it. The unused kitchen, the deep armchair by the window, a stack of unopened mail resting on the counter. Nothing had changed. And yet, none of it felt the same. The messages kept coming. Not from journalists, Kai had filtered most of those, but from people with no microphones, no blue checks. A teacher in St. Louis, a gate agent in Phoenix, a retired officer from El Paso. They didn't ask what she would do next. They just told her what they had once kept quiet. She read them all, replied to a few, not many, not enough. But maybe it didn't take much. That morning she woke before the alarm. The light was still gray through the blinds, early and unresolved. She stood in front of the mirror, pulling on a clay-colored jacket and simple shoes. There was nothing remarkable about what she wore. But she looked at herself longer than usual. On the table was an envelope from an organization she didn't recognize, Alliance for Civil Transit. Inside was an invitation to a private forum, a speaker list, and a handwritten line at the bottom. We don't need a speech. We need a witness. She set the letter down, picked it up again, set it down once more. Near midday, she walked into a quiet cafe tucked off a sloped street. A green awning shaded the entrance, and inside the space was nearly empty. She ordered a black espresso and took a seat near the window. Outside, the city moved without urgency. At the next table, a small group of students typed into laptops and spoke in half-whispers. One of them, fair-skinned, hair dyed lavender, glanced toward Amira. Then again. She heard her name before she turned. Laurent, right?
The woman from the flight? Not sure. Could just look like her. No, it's definitely her. I've seen that clip a dozen times. Amira didn't turn her head. One of the others said, "If it had been me, I don't think I could have stayed calm." "I'd have yelled," another replied. "And lost the weight of it," someone said. "She didn't have to yell." Amira listened, said nothing. When the group left, one of them quietly placed a folded paper on her table without a word. She opened it once they were gone. "Thank you for teaching us not everything needs to be a performance." She folded it again, slipped it into her pocket. That afternoon, her phone rang. An unknown number. She almost declined the call, then answered. "Ms. Laurent?" A woman's voice, soft but practiced. "This is Justine from the Institute for Behavioral Justice. We're designing a training for airline staff on unconscious bias in premium service environments. Your name was recommended." "By who?" "A former employee, Joyce. She said she met you on flight LGA-LAX last week." Amira was silent for 3 seconds. Justine continued. "There's no public speaking, no press. We want to build scenarios based on lived experience. You wouldn't be asked to tell your story, just confirm what feels real. You can decline, of course." "No recording?" "None." "No media?" "No media." "Send the info. I'll review it." After the call, Amira stepped onto the small balcony. The air carried the soft scent of orange blossom from a courtyard tree. Across the street, a delivery worker in a red uniform sat on a stoop, head tilted toward her phone, face unreadable. When she looked up, her eyes met Amira's. She smiled, not wide, not forced, just real. Amira nodded back. The next day, she arrived at a third-floor conference room in a Santa Monica building. No banners, no branding. About 30 people filled the space, mostly airline employees, a few security officers, and 2 members of a flight attendant union. No one recognized her. She was placed in a breakout circle where the facilitator posed a single prompt. "Have you ever witnessed a situation where you weren't sure whether or not to intervene?" A man in his 50s, badge clipped to his shirt and labeled Gate Manager, described seeing a female passenger in business class treated coldly because her outfit didn't match the expected standard. At the time, I told myself I was being too sensitive. But after seeing her video, I saw myself in the guy standing there saying nothing. Amira didn't say who she was. She just looked him in the eye and said, "The next time, don't be him." The session ended without applause, without statements. But people left differently than they had entered. Joyce was waiting for her in the hallway. "I figured you might show," she said. "Told them if you did, everything would feel different." "It was just a training." "No," Joyce replied. "It was a door." Amira didn't answer, but when she reached the parking lot, she paused and glanced into the side mirror of a parked car. She saw her own face, unmoved, unmasked, unremarkable. And for the first time in weeks, it didn't just reflect silence. It reminded her of something shifting, something beginning. The flight back to New York wasn't direct. Amira had accepted the connection on purpose, an extra hour in Chicago, enough time to breathe between terminals, enough time to watch how people moved when they weren't being watched. She didn't wear her uniform, just black slacks, a gray sweater, no makeup, no markings. Still, the man in line ahead of her glanced at her boarding pass as if checking for accuracy.
She said nothing. Let it happen. Let him wonder. The flight boarded without incident. No seat confusion. No explanations required. She took her place in 3A and settled in. The engine whined to life. The cabin lights dimmed. The plane rose. No one knew who she was. And for now, that was enough. She didn't sleep. Instead, she let her mind move the way rivers do when no one is watching, quietly, constantly. She thought of Isaiah and his coffee. Of Nadia with her wide eyes and her phone always ready. Of the girl in the youth center who asked, "Were you scared?" And the way she'd answered no, but meant something different. She wasn't scared for herself. She was scared it would mean nothing. But it hadn't. At O'Hare, she moved through the terminal like a ghost in plain sight. Security waved her through without comment. The cashier at the sandwich kiosk handed her change with a nod. No one flinched. No one looked twice. The quiet felt different now. Not judgment. Not resistance. Space. She sat by a window, watching planes taxi in slow choreography. In her bag, the notebook remained closed, but heavy. Someone sat 2 chairs down. A woman in her 60s. Dark skin, silver braids, hands wrapped around a thermos. "You her?" she asked, not looking up. Amira turned slightly. "The one from the plane. The one who didn't move." She didn't answer. The woman smiled. "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted to sit near you. That's all." They stayed like that for 10 minutes. No small talk, just presence. Before boarding, the woman rose and said, "My granddaughter's 9. She asked me if it's true that people still get treated different for looking like us. I said yes, but I told her we don't always stay quiet. Thank you for helping me say that." Then she was gone. On the second flight, Amira sat in the aisle seat next to a young man with headphones and a hoodie pulled low. He didn't look at her. She didn't look at him. The silence between them wasn't tension. It was comfort. When they landed at JFK, the air was thick with summer. Tarmac heat rising through the jet bridge, sweat clinging beneath fabric. Amira moved slowly, deliberately. Her steps didn't rush. Her breath stayed even. At baggage claim, a woman from the airline's training division stood waiting. "We're finalizing the materials," she said. "Your section's in the leadership module, scenario-based, exactly as you described. Joyce helped draft the language. Would you be willing to preview the final version?" Amira didn't take the packet right away. She asked, "Does it make anyone uncomfortable?" The woman hesitated. "Some. Yes." "Good," Amira said, and took it. She didn't go straight home. She took the long route through the city, past neighborhoods she used to patrol on weekend detail, past the school where she taught ROTC one summer after Fallujah, past the place she once waited 3 hours in full-dress uniform for an interview she never got. The same people were still on the streets, the same vendors, the same rhythms. But she felt different, not heavier, not larger, just placed. She entered her apartment as dusk settled, peeled off her shoes and stood by the window. Outside, lights blinked on across the city like quiet affirmations. She opened the notebook again, flipped past the lines about strength and silence, past the paragraph she wrote after Horizon, past the page she'd marked with a folded corner. She started a new one. And this time, the pen didn't hesitate. She wrote about airports, not the buildings, but the invisible rules inside them. She wrote about uniforms and how they turn heads, about what it means to hold your breath every time someone double-checks your seat assignment. She didn't use names. She didn't have to. When she finished, she signed it with only her initials, folded the page in half, slipped it into an envelope. The return address was printed on a card she kept taped to the fridge. Nadia's publication. A small independent outlet started with grant money and conviction. She'd asked for a story. Amira never promised one. but here it was. Later that week, a boy at a high school in Detroit would stand up during civics class and ask, "Why do we talk about freedom but never mention dignity?" Later that month, a memo from Pinnacle Airways would circulate to all flight staff, a new protocol for handling seating disputes, emphasizing accountability and bias recognition. Later that year, a mother in Oakland would show her daughter the mural of women in flight suits and say, "See? That's you." But Amira didn't know any of that yet. She only knew the sun was setting. And that she had not disappeared. She was still here, not louder, but clearer, not celebrated, but known. She closed the notebook, rested her hand on the cover, then turned off the light.